So I've been asked numerous times, how do I make my Instapot yogurt? To start, I use a 2% milk. I've done whole milk and has been very successful with that. You can see that it has not been ultra pasteurized. And I try to find something that has a date that's a few weeks out if possible. Okay, so I have my Instapot Duo in my 2% milk, and I just pour that in. This just came out of the fridge from the store. After the milk's been added to that, I'm going to put the lid on it. This does not need to be sealed, but I do shut it all the way. And then on the Instapot, I hit the yogurt button, adjust until I get to boil. And now it's going to boil the milk and make sure it kills off any bacteria so that when we add our cultures, there's no other bacteria the cultures are competing with to grow. After this comes to a boil, it'll let me know that it's done, and we will cool it down to a temperature that won't kill the cultures and proceed from there. Okay, as you can see, the yogurt is done with the boil cycle. It switched once it was done from boil to saying yogurt on the front there, Y-O-G-T. It took about an hour, and that was fairly cold milk. I'm just gonna open this up. There's all that milk in there. Now I've cleaned my sink, and I created an ice bath for the yogurt to go into, and I'm going to go ahead and place that in there. I want the yogurt to cool to 110 degrees before I add my starter yogurt cultures to that, and before I set it back in the Instapot for 8 hours. So I'm going to let that cool down, and I have a thermometer to read that once it's done. It's starting off somewhere close to what boiling would be. So it's pretty high. So we're going to wait until it gets down to that 110, and then we'll get back with the next steps. All right, we're back, and the milk has cooled to below 110. It looks like it's sitting at 75 degrees, which is not a big deal. We're going to move this back into the Instapot. A couple of notes: I dried off the sides and bottom of the liner before I set it in there from the water in the sink. Also, you want to make sure that you use a fairly clean environment while you're making this. I cleaned the sink before I set it in there. You just want to make sure that you're not letting other bacteria get in your sterile milk that you boiled. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to add yogurt to the milk, and I'm going to use 1/3 cup of yogurt from my last batch. This originally started with a Fage, and that's, like I said, 1/3 cup for about a gallon. We're just going to dump that in there. Once you get it dumped in there, I use a whisk and whisk it around. Make sure that it mixes in there really good. After I finished whisking, I put the lid back on, close it. Once again, I don't need to worry about the seal because we're not bringing this to pressure. I'm gonna, on the panel here, I'll hit the yogurt button again. And now I'm gonna use adjust. And I'm gonna go until it goes to the 8-hour one. And then you can also see that it says normal. When it was on the 24-hour, it said less, and that's not to make yogurt. That's for a rice fermented dish that you can do. So on the normal, it should have this set to about 110 degrees, which is what's optimal for making yogurt. And we're just gonna leave it at that. Unlike when you do other dishes under pressure, this counts up instead of counting down. So once it gets to 8 hours, it'll say 8 hours. I'm gonna go to bed, I'll get up in the morning. Once it gets to 8 hours, it'll just kind of keep it warm. You don't have to worry about getting to it immediately as soon as the 8 hours is up. I'll just wait till I wake up and then strain it, and I'll show you that process. Okay, the 8 hours is up. After it did its 8 hours and it counted up to the 8 hours, it switched back to saying yogurt on the front there once it was complete. And we're going to take the lid off. And now you can see that it's not milk anymore. When I tip it to the side, you can kind of tell that it's all staying together in the edges. So we got some good yogurt. Next I'm going to strain it in my chinois strainer. I just set it in a Tupperware, a big Tupperware. It's a little bit bigger than the chinois strainer. And I'll put the yogurt inside here. It won't hold quite all of it, but as it drains off the way, I'll add more to it until I get all of it in there. You can just kind of tell the chinois strainer is a fine metal filter. That works pretty good. I don't need to put any cheesecloth or anything else, and that's easy and works for me. People do filter other ways. Alright, I've added all of the, not all of the yogurt, what I could fit of the yogurt into the chinois strainer, and I'm going to just let that strain. I'm going to set this in the refrigerator, and this will conclude the steps I'm going to show via video on how to do yogurt. I will note that once it gets to a consistency that I like of straining, I will stop straining it, and I'll use my Immersion Blender's whisk attachment to beat it and make it nice and creamy and smooth. I hope you've enjoyed this.